Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jenny Greenspan here for Congregation Beth-El for our weekly Shabbat morning Torah Talk. This week, as we start a new cycle, we are all the way back at the very beginning of our Torah this morning. And so we'll say Shabbat Shalom and welcome, and we'll jump in a few minutes. But Shabbat Shalom and welcome to the Seagulls and to the Sclairs. So happy to have you joining every week. And any others who are here, and we'll say Shabbat Shalom to Jody Zucker. Good morning. So glad to see everybody here. Shabbat Shalom, good morning. Boker Tov to Marty Lip as well. As usual, if you'd like to follow along with me in a Chumash, you can either grab a physical copy of an Etz Chaim or any other Chumash, or you can go to our website, beeasy613.org, and select the virtual Shabbat morning resources. You can scroll down to where you see Torah Talk and Shabbat morning services resources, and click the Etz Chaim link, where you will find our Torah portion for this week from the very beginning again. We are at the start of the book of Genesis. And so we will go a little bit on creation today. But first, Shabbat Shalom and welcome as well to James Roth and to Michael Kahn. So glad that everybody is here. So I want to talk a little bit about, one, why we go back to the beginning each year, and then share a little bit, two small things today that are jumping out at me from our Torah portion. Though there are many, many things, and our B'nai Mitzvah will go into a few more in a little bit. We had the blessing this morning of having a B'nai Mitzvah, so two young men becoming Bar Mitzvah together, who will share their two different insights into this week's Torah portion. So lots to hear about. First, I want to point out our Torah reading. It's kind of interesting that we go back to the beginning of a story that never really finishes. If you noticed last week at the end of Deuteronomy, which was really the second to last, as we mentioned, the Israelites are primed to enter into the land of Israel, but they don't ever actually do it within the Torah. That particular story is held for the book of Joshua that we never actually read liturgically. We just kind of let them sit there, and we go back to the beginning and start our reading cycle over again on Monday evening for Simchat Torah. We rolled our Torah back to the very beginning to start over. We never get the end of the story in the book of Joshua. And I think it's partially because our lives and time actually work that way. I don't think that time works in a perfect linear way. Time is not simply one thing happens and then another. We do kind of seem to cycle back to previous states. For Doctor Who fans, we might say that time is a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. And I don't think it's quite as mishmash and mixed as that. I think time might actually be kind of layered and circular. And we kind of come back to similar points, not without learning new things. We learn new things each time, but then we come back to previous lessons and review things yet again that we may not have seen before, and find new insights in our Torah that we may not have noticed because the year that we have had has taught us new things. And I think that there are two things in particular in this Torah portion that are worthy of revisiting regularly, that I think we do need the reminder to come back to the beginning to take the look at. So we'll invite you, if you are following along in an Etz Chaim Chumash, I'll be on page 15. If you are in a different edition of the Chumash, I am in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. And there are two insights. This comes in the second creation story. The book of Genesis, or the opening chapters of Genesis, kind of create to share the big picture creation story and then the narrow. And I want to look at a couple of things in the narrower one. One of our B'nai Mitzvah, we'll talk about the bigger picture one later. So you'll hear from Mr. Evan Rudy on that one in a little bit. And his brother Noah will speak from a little bit after what we're going to talk about today. So we will get to hear lots from this week's Torah portion. But in this particular piece of the creation story, we have seen the human being, Adam, placed into the garden. Our English here translates Adam as man, but often we can read Adam as really any human being. But this is the first human being in this particular creation story. We don't even yet have the second human being, the one often called as the woman. So we have here, and the Lord God, or Adonai, took the man, or the person, placed them in the Garden of Eden to till it and to tend it. So here we have the first charge, the first real charge of this human being, is not really to simply be in the garden, but to till it and tend it. That this is the first command, that we are to care for this earth and to care for the garden in which we find ourselves, this gift of creation that has been given to us and that we don't always care for as well as we can. We saw many reports this past summer about how poorly we have been doing as a species, and suggestions of ways that each of us can step up further. In Kohelet Rabbah, a midrashic text, actually looking at the book of Ecclesiastes, which notes the temporality and fragility of our world, said that when the Holy One created that first human being, the Holy One took them around, led them around all of the trees of the garden, and said, "Look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. Look at all I have created it just for you, first human being, and every human coming after. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world, for if you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you. And not only that, you may cause the death of the future tzaddik Moses." So in this midrash, in this rabbinic commentary, we see suggested that God created this world for us, and said that we must care for it, because if we do not care for it, if we allow our own selfishness to destroy this world, there will be no one who can come and repair it afterward. We've already seen certain points of no return with what we can do to care for our environment, and we're being reminded in this midrash that we must care for it, that God created that first human being to care for God's creation, and that we must continue that work. And that if we do not, we run the risk of no one being able to fix it later, and of causing someone who could be great in the future to not have the future that they deserve to have later on. I think we have one reminder here in our return to the beginning of our Torah, that we need to do our best work to care for the physical of our world, the physical of our environment, the physical of our earth. Just a couple of verses later, in verse 18, so you'll move forward to page 16 if you're following along in the Etz Chaim Chumash, we see the first thing in the world that God suggests is lo tov. In that first chapter, you'll hear many times in that it was good. God created something and it was good. Rabbi Dennis mentioned that last night in our gathering for our Friday evening services, that God's assessment of each piece of creation is that it is good. And the first time we see that something is not good is this verse here in chapter 2, verse 18. Vayomer Adonai Elohim lo tov heyot ha'adam levado, eselo ezer kenegdo. And Adonai God said, "It is not good for a person to be alone. I will make a fitting helper for them." So this is the precursor in the second creation story to the creation of Chava, to the creation of Eve, because God sees very quickly that it is our responsibility to care for the world, and that the best way that we can do that is also to care for ourselves. One of the best ways to care for ourselves is to have companionship, whether that is partner and intimate companionship, or friendship, or team, or colleagues. We are not at our best as human beings if we completely withdraw and be too alone all the time. We have learned much in the last year of the dangers of being alone. We've spent all of the last Torah reading cycle at distance, and with COVID protocols keeping us further from one another. And here we have, as we return to the beginning of our Torah reading yet again, we are reminded to not give in to that loneliness, that we should find ways to reach out, and that we do not want to be alone, and that we together can do the work to care for our care for our creation, or to care for one another, and that we are at our best alone. Not alone. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan suggested that many faiths see salvation as an individual process, a faith connection between one person and God or another deity. But for us, salvation is communal. We see God give all of us the Torah together in the book of Exodus. And for us, we really lean as Jews on this lo tov, heyot adam, ha'adam levado. It's not good for us to be totally alone. That we want to be together, that we find salvation and strength and spirituality in one another and in reaching out to one another. So as we return to the beginning of our Torah reading cycle this year, I wish us not only a week, but a full year of doing everything that we can, each of us and all of us, to care for our physical environment, to care for the earth that we are given as a gift in creation in this week's Torah portion, and to care for our emotional and spiritual needs as within the gift of one another that we are also given in this Torah portion. We were reminded earlier on in chapter 1, verse 27, that each of us was created in God's image, and we all need one another, both for the physical of the world and for the emotional of one another. May we care for our world, and may we find strength and love and community in one another. Say Shabbat Shalom. Thanks so much for those who've joined too. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome as well to Pat Rudy Fleet. So glad that you'll get to enjoy some learning with me as well as with your nephews later on. And Shabbat Shalom to Peter Mayer, to keeps jumping, Cheryl Toof, Jim Hammond, to Ryan Dorman and Julia Whitehead. Shabbat Shalom. I'm so glad so many of you have joined me this morning, and we will continue on in a new reading of our Torah, ever forward and ever back, ever cycling forward in time and back to the lessons that we need to review again. We'll say Shabbat Shalom. Thanks so much for joining me here. And at 10 o'clock, please join us either in the sanctuary or on the live stream, leaning toward on the live stream so that the family can be together this morning at 10 o'clock as we celebrate the B'nai Mitzvah of Evan and Noah Rudy together. We'll say Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you soon.